Shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. So I think that like one of the larger narratives that exists on OSU campus, but I think it's also mirrored in like the larger society, is that trans people, particularly trans women of color, are sort of faking it in order to kind of like get into the women's restroom and to harass cisgender women, and to sort of use their transness as sort of a disguise in attempts to infiltrate cis women's spaces. And I think this is like a narrative that's used in a lot of circumstances. Like it's used in a lot of gendered spaces. There's like women's only music festivals where, you know, there'll be like TERFs who don't want trans women to be in these spaces. And I think that's really fucked up, right, for a lot of reasons. Predominantly because when you look at like the statistics of like who's in danger, right, and like whose safety we should be prioritizing in our like current political climate, it's not really cis women. I'm gonna say that. So trans women, there's never been an instance of a trans woman attacking a cis woman in a gendered space like a restroom. That's never happened, right? That's a lie. Like that's a thing that people made up to make people feel certain ways about trans women and trans people. And so when you think about that, and you think about the fact that restrooms are indeed like sources of violence for a lot of people, but those people aren't cis women, right? Those people are trans people. Restrooms can be sources of violence for trans people in the sense that trans people can go into these restrooms and be harassed. Trans people can, that violence can be psychological violence, so knowing that you're not welcome in a space and knowing that if you go into that space and you will likely be harassed or threatened or even killed, that's a form of psychological terror and like violence.
Okay. The way I was raised, I was taught to respect everyone and to always just like include people no matter what. And so because of that, I totally think that people who identify as transgender should be allowed to use the bathroom that corresponds with what they believe their gender is. That's just the way I was raised. I mean, I know a lot of people who don't think that way, who would be very uncomfortable by seeing someone who's transgender in their bathroom, and I think that's totally wrong. I want people to feel comfortable no matter what, and I'm gonna have kids one day, and I definitely am gonna teach them not to be judgmental. I want my children to respect everyone and to be open-minded and not judge people, because that's not okay in my book. And Oregon State is making a lot of progress as far as being inclusive goes. A lot of places on campus, they have gender-neutral bathrooms, and they've started the I'll Go With You campaign on campus, which allows people who might not feel comfortable using the bathroom that they want to use. It allows them to basically have someone go with them and ensure that they won't be harassed.
Shit, dude, Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a junior at Oregon State. And for me personally, if I'm in the bathroom and there's a trans woman in there with me, I would never feel uncomfortable unless she did something to make me feel uncomfortable, which another woman could do as well. So I think it's definitely not the fact that someone's trans, it's just who they are as a person that would make me feel uncomfortable. So like anybody can be a perv or anybody can cause harm or make you feel uncomfortable, but I don't think that has anything to do with how you identify as a person.
I think that blue lights and, you know, offering gender-neutral restrooms and things like that, while they are, while it's like a nice idea to like add these sort of like safety precautions onto campus, I think that universities and systems of power in general and institutions can use those things as a means to like sort of have like a bandage solution, right? And be like, okay, we've fixed the problem. We've added more blue lights on campus. That means that, you know, violence against trans women of color isn't happening on a national scale. And that can often be used to erase these violences, and to sort of absolve a lot of the guilt that I think that Oregon State University itself holds, and, you know, these larger systems of power hold. I think that there's also sort of this issue of like Oregon State University and sort of these larger institutions sort of expect oppressed and marginalized people to solve their own like problems, which aren't really their problems when you think about like who created the issue. And so I feel like that's a big part of, you know, my role on this campus, and a lot of other like students of color and queer students of color is sort of that the university is paying us to fix problems that it created.
When it comes to campus safety, I think that Oregon State does have a very safe campus. However, when people walk around at night, it's very dark on campus, and oftentimes I know people just like want to run from campus back to their place. And I don't necessarily think it should be like that. I don't think people should fear walking home. My girlfriend, for example, has to call me like after her later classes when she's walking home just because she fears for her own safety. And she should, honestly, because we're constantly getting emails about people getting attacked on campus. I know there was one girl who got toxic chemicals sprayed in her eyes and she had to be hospitalized, and that's not very reassuring for a student like me being on campus. I don't want to fear for my safety. I definitely want to feel comfortable, and I want other people to feel comfortable on campus. And Oregon State's campus does have a lot of those blue lights around that provide a little bit of comfort for people who are walking home late at night. But I think that is a small step when it comes to people feeling like completely comfortable. I think adding more blue lights is not really the step that we need to take in improving safety for students. And I can't really offer a suggestion as to what should be done in the way of increasing safety, but I know that something needs to be done for sure.
So last term I had a class that was all the way on the other side of campus, and it was probably like a 15-minute walk to get there, and it ended at 7. And it was really dark by that point, and I would have to walk back. I would literally look over my shoulder, and I'm not like a nervous person, but it was just like, you don't feel safe on campus. And I definitely don't think the blue lights made me feel safe. Like, what would make me feel safe is if I saw like a security guard or like someone working on campus walking by, just like knowing that they're there. But I definitely don't think the blue lights like comforted me. Maybe adding more would, but yeah, as it is right now, it definitely isn't like awesome.
When I'm thinking about sort of gendered spaces on campus, another thing that comes to mind is dorms, and how most of the dorms on campus are, at least your room is gendered, if not your entire floor. I happened to live on a gendered floor my freshman year, which is really interesting when I sort of signed up for that dorm at Sackett Hall, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to room with someone who identified as a man living in that dorm, because, you know, as someone who identifies as like queer, it kind of felt like pretty useless to be assigned a roommate who I was going to be attracted to anyway, or maybe, and who I had the potential to be attracted to anyway. And I think that there's sort of this erasure of queer people in the gendering of spaces like that. There's the erasure of trans people, obviously, but I think that there's also definitely an erasure of queer people, because I think that the reason why we often try to segregate people is because of heteronormativity, right? Because we sort of expect, and we not only do we expect people to be straight, but we sort of encourage them to be straight. We pressure people to be straight in ways like this. And you know, one thing that came up during my conversation with the directors of this film was that was sort of how dorms like forcing you to like live in a gendered space like that, or at least like encouraging you to live in a gendered space like that, is sort of a training grounds for sort of the expectation that you're going to continue living in gendered spaces as you move into apartments and houses and stuff like that until you find, you know, your spouse, and then you live with them, right? But not only does like that expectation of living with someone who is like your same gender, which is a whole other can of worms if you're like non-binary, because like how the hell is that going to work for you? Not only is it like encouraging that heteronormativity in that space, but it's encouraging it for like your future. And I think that that's a really kind of scary like policing, a sort of sexual and gender identity policing that happens on campus.
So gendered spaces are something that definitely exist on campus at Oregon State. When you get your dorm assignment as a freshman, most likely if you are a man or a woman, you're going to be placed with someone or a couple people of the same gender. And that's just the way it's always been. Like, all universities pretty much follow that, but I have to wonder how people who don't identify with traditional binary genders, like how they get treated. Like, if someone identifies as a man but was born a female, like, are they allowed to live with a man or a woman? Like, I don't know, or are they forced to get a single room, which oftentimes they may not be able to afford because single rooms are more expensive to live by yourself. And if a man identifies as gay, are they going to be put with a straight man? Because that might be uncomfortable for one or both people in that situation. I really don't know, and I think a lot of problems could arise because of that. Another gendered space that I always notice is Dixon Recreation Center. I'll go there to work out, and I'll just immediately notice the divide between male and female. The men are generally always lifting weights on the first floor, and women are generally always doing cardio on the second floor. There's always that split that I notice. And that's why it's really refreshing to go to the library, because I just notice the ratio of male and female on each floor. There's really no like obvious split between genders. There's a good mix, people get along and study, and there's really no there's just no discrimination when it comes to the library.
So I transferred here as a sophomore, and there were 3 dorm options for me to live in, and one of them was hall cell, and that dorm is open to like all genders can live together. You don't have to be like female and female. There's not like an all-female floor or whatever. I didn't pick that one just because it didn't work for me, but I was really comforted knowing that was an option for students who might want that, and I thought that was a really unique and attractive part of Oregon State as a campus.